Welcome, everyone, to the Movie Potluck once again this week. I'm really excited to be here this week. This was a terrible week altogether. And the one thing I looked forward to all week was doing the podcast. So, super happy that everybody's here. I wanted to just real briefly, before we start talking about our theme, before we start talking about our movies, all the glorious food, I wanted to address something real quick. So, if you hear this, you obviously won't see people on the screen, but we do have a video segment to this. And every week I end up as a little icon inside of a box. And I actually had somebody ask me why on all my podcasts am I never live? And there's a very good reason, and I thought I'd share that with you. So, when I was younger, I had something called crossed eyes. It looks really funny, and I'm really glad that my parents didn't let me sort of walk around the rest of my life with crossed eyes. I feel like it would have been crazy, and I would have been bullied mercilessly, well, more mercilessly than I was. But as a result, what happened was the only way to fix that was to do this little operation that cut the muscle in between the eyes. So it gave me normal sort of vision and my eyes were okay. But now I have a terrible lazy eye. So when I'm looking at a camera, it's difficult for me to tell whether my eyes are going to the left or to the right. It's weird. I have gecko vision, basically. My eyes don't work together, but they both see things. It's very disconcerting. And rather than regale you with weird visuals from my face, I figured I would come up with interesting different icons and throw those out there and let my guests, who always look amazing, sort of share that spotlight. So that's the story. Just wanted to throw that out there so that everybody knew. Okay, this week on the Movie Potluck, we chose the theme. Basically, it's a young adult literature that has been transformed into movie format. Now, there's a lot of young adult literature out there. There's not a lot, amazingly, as I learned in the research for this podcast, of adaptations of young adult literature into movies. There's lots of little series. There's quite a bit of animation. Well, a bit of animation. There's also quite a few like shorts, not really what I would consider to be nice long movies. And a lot of our what we consider to be young adult films are actually original ideas. So this was quite interesting. But we have lots to choose from, and I think almost all of us grew up with some kind of young adult literature that we identified with. It resonated with us. It changed us in some way. And then when we saw the movie, we felt either super happy to see the movie in its full form, or we were so disappointed because that's not what it was about at all. Hopefully, the movies that we've chosen today will meet the standard. They'll live up to the hype. So, what's young adult? Well, young adult is usually age 12 to 18, although I hear that that is broadening quite a bit now. So that we have a little bit on either side. We have moving more toward 10 and moving up actually more toward 20, which is an interesting idea of expanding young adult. So that's the target market. And for a long time, especially back in the 70s, even in the 60s, as young adult literature was gaining a bit of popularity, there was a huge pushback against it because they labeled it as problematic romances. They kind of gave the genre the silly sticker, like, well, nobody really wants to see that except, dopey teenagers. And we have really come a long way since then. Um, I think one of the things that, if you love this genre, that you understand is that the young adult category is a chance to experience or re-experience youth, sort of whole cloth. All of the things that go into being the young hero or heroine, they're not just those experiences. They're the experience of being young and seeing things differently than perhaps as an adult you would see things, or as a younger child being able to understand. So it's a nice and kind of interesting block of time when so many things are coming together. Lots of these adventures are fantastical. Some of them are mundane, and I feel like a lot of young adult can be very sad. Um, I also feel like that's a rite of passage. So I fully applaud it because, again, this is where we learn all of these valuable life lessons. And I'm going to talk about one in a minute that I think in sort of the past maybe 10, 15 years has been a bit of a hallmark, especially for the teenagers that I know. One of the most interesting things that I have sort of come across and that I did a little bit of research for this podcast is this idea that young adult literature is only for young adults. And I talked to a bunch of people, fellow authors, people that also do a bit of movie critique, and the one thing that they both said is that young adult literature, although that's a genre type, it definitely has very wide audiences. Wide audiences meaning that there's not a person alive who doesn't remember, if they are much older, watching like the movie Heidi, which I don't know if anybody even knows what that is, but will remember it and say this was a coming of age kind of movie that brought me to tears, made me feel things, gave me ideas about growing up. um I was reminded again of the movie that was derived from the literature, The Outsiders, which is basically the two rival factions. um they it is a little bit turfy, but a lot like West Side Story, the real story is inside of that. And that also is a brilliant coming of age story. Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is one of those that feels contemporary, also stretches through these pervasive themes of growing up. And I have to say, one of my favorites in this genre is The Golden Compass, because it is sort of the fantasy version of growing up, and the things that happen are so far and above and beyond what we would expect for a young person to be able to do, but they're all there rising to the occasion. I absolutely love that story. But the one that drives me a little bit crazy, because teenagers will talk about this as if it is somehow like a grail story, is The Fault in Our Stars. And I don't know if you know too much about this story, but it's so sad. It is a really, really difficult story to get through. um and it reminded me again that the reason you want to see a movie, read a book, feel that connection is because the emotions are so big. And as I was thinking about some of the movies that even we have that we've gone over here, that we have created out of Hollywood, they're not always movies that sort of leave us with big emotional impact. They're movies that we enjoy watching. There are movies that we are very entertained by. But when a movie brings you to either tears, or when a movie has such an impact on you that it is indelible for the rest of your life, those are the kinds of movies that tend to be in this young adult category. And they tend to be the movies that, as kids are growing up, they will hold on to for the rest of their lives. So I'm going to date myself here and say that one of the movies that I saw when I was a kid was Watership Down. Now, I can't really classify Watership Down as a young adult movie, but it was served up as young adult. And I was way too young to watch this movie, by the way, but it was animated. It was apparently what everybody wanted their kids to watch. I remember that movie to this day, both as a metaphor for how you are supposed to behave with each other, community. Before I even understood what socialism was, I saw these bunnies and I completely got it. It was just incredible. But the but the main protagonist of this story dies at the end. Sorry, spoiler alert. Um and it it just wrecked me. It wrecked me for days and days and days. And I still remember now what that feeling was. And when something is sad, a lot of times I will remember exactly. I actually put it into sort of a scale like, was it as sad as when he dies at the end? I feel like sometimes that is sort of where we jump into how good young adult literature can be. Not that it has to be that sad, but it moves us in that way. So I'm going to bring my guests in, but I want to mention one other thing, and that is the amazing job that Netflix is doing right now with young adult series. So a little bit different than movies, obviously, because there's quite a bit more to be told, and uh, the category is a lot broader. But Netflix has embraced Enola Holmes, which is supposed to be Sherlock Holmes's relative. It's actually really good. Sweet Tooth. I don't know if anybody of you have seen that, but that also is an epic one, very fantasy esque. Lock and Key, and quite a few others that feel like clearly there is a huge market for young adult content. Otherwise, Netflix wouldn't be investing so heavily in it. So I think it's definitely here to stay. But what movies that are young adult that we find, I think, important, I really feel like it depends on how old you are and what you saw when you saw it. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring into my podcast my guests. I'm going to ask them what they thought their most favorite young adult inspired movies were. And we're going to have a conversation tonight about whether or not those movies changed our lives and what movies may have changed our lives. So I'm going to start with Tory. Tory, welcome.
Hi,
How are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. I'm hoping that you don't mind if I try to kind of put you through the ringer a little bit and see what emotional turmoil came out of your young adult years.
Oh gosh.
That's what we're that's what we're going to do. So tell us your movie first and tell us
Okay.
why you chose it.
I chose The Princess Bride because I feel like it's a coming of age romance, and every little girl loves a good romance story. And it's funny, and Mel Brooks did a great job directing it. And the actors and actresses just did a phenomenal job. I just thought the whole movie was great, and I grew up with it. You know, that was what was playing in the background when I was playing Barbies. You know, like that's I just remember it in my childhood, and I loved it ever since then. And so it was a book, and it got a big. You know, you wanted a book into a movie, so I thought that was a good one.
I think it actually is a really good one, and also this is a great example of literature that actually isn't sad. I mean, it's
Right.
daring and it's drama, but yeah, this is a good example of a movie that fits that young adult category that doesn't end on a super sad note or encompass things that are incredibly sad. Perilous, but I would find it not. Yeah, I don't think I can find anything
Oh, Rob
too
Renner. Oh
sad
yeah, he
there.
did. I thought for some reason Mel Brooks was involved in it. He had to have been. I thought it was like Princess Bride and Spaceballs. Anyway, I'm sorry. I stand corrected.
So okay, so tell us what was the impact that this movie had on you as a young adult? Like what do you feel like this movie changed about you or changed for
It
you?
gave me like that schoolgirl crush like satisfaction. So like it toned into my boy craziness, and I wanted that love. I wanted somebody to treat me like Wesley treated Buttercup. Like I wanted that undevoted, undying devotion. You know, like that's the type of love that I wanted whenever I was younger. Maybe a little diluted, but I thought it was possible back then. You know.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, did that work out well for you? Did you grow
I
up
mean,
and meet Wesley, or what happened?
no, I mean, I kind of did, but not like that. Like he wasn't like, it wasn't. He wasn't my stable boy. Let's just say that.
I, I I I feel like the world would be a better place if we had more Buttercups and Wesleys and uh,
Yes.
everybody basically. Yeah, I feel like we would be a much better place if that were the truth. Okay, well, I mean, good that we have that fantasy genre to retreat to. That's one of my favorite genres as well, for sure. Okay, so Betty. Betty, welcome to the show. How are you tonight?
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. It looks like you got some sun. I'm super excited about that.
It was a cloudy day and I was out for a couple of hours and I got burnt.
As
You
someone
should
who
see
lives
the
in
back of my neck.
Hawaii, I feel that pain. I definitely feel that pain. We have
Literally?
two there are two versions of people in Hawaii, those that tan well and those that just walk into the sun and crisp. I happen to be the latter, so yes, I just
Yeah.
crisp. So tell us tonight about the movie that you chose.
I chose Anne of Green Gables, the version from the late 80s, not Anne with an E. Um, this, I actually saw the movie first because I was a little seventh grader being bullied, and I had an eighth grade, or I had a seventh grade English teacher who was amazing. And at the time in the 90s, this was being shown on Disney Channel in clips and probably PBS. And my English teacher played it for us in class because of me. And it became my favorite movie instantly. Everyone made fun of it. I was in love with it, partly because Anne Shirley is a ginger. Um, like you go through these difficult times, and then you see someone who is also going through difficult things, and then she's always optimistic. She finds this family that takes her in and accepts her. I kind of always wished Marilla would come along and take me in. So it was kind of one of those. Like it's my comfort movie. I watch that. I've seen that at least once a year since I was 13, so or 12,
Oh wow.
however old. So and I've watched all of them, even though the third one is not great. I like Megan Follows. I watched Rain because it follows. Um, so it's just I don't know, I love it. And I like the best friends. I always wanted a best friend like Diana. So
So
my
so
bosom
for
buddy.
so for you both have a kind of nostalgia toward the movies themselves, right?
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
it's one of those like I will never give up Anne Shirley. Like I identify with her. I mean, and honestly, there were not a lot of there were not a lot of gingers to like look up to when I was a kid. I had Reba McEntire and a lot of orphans.
Oh, good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Oh, what's his name on the Partridge Family or
Yeah,
something?
you didn't have Ed Sheeran. I mean, come
No,
on.
Ed
Annie, we
Sheeran.
had no, we had Annie, we had Pippi Longstocking,
Oh, that's right.
orphans. Um, there was another orphan like Annie. Maybe it was Anne. But Annie, first of all, Anne was way better. And I heard that Lucy Ma Montgomery would walk around town reciting uh, the dialogue for her book characters as she was writing. So she also was a little bit nutty, probably, which is why she writes so well. Very
Yeah.
So
dramatic, Anne.
so do you I'll get to my choice in one second, but do you think that watching these movies, and this is for both of you, do you think that they influenced the rest of your life? Do you think that they So at the time that you watched them, clearly they were impactful. But do you think that they resonated with you like later in life? Do you still, other than for the nostalgia value, do you feel like there are still life lessons in them that you keep going back to again and again?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite quotes comes from um, Anne Shirley, her teacher. I don't. So she actually told her teacher, and I believe the teacher recited it back to her. Um, Tomorrow's a new day with no mistakes in it, and I think about that all the time. Um, like she makes a lot of mistakes, and she always finds a way to overcome them. She always finds a way to overcome her obstacles. I think about that movie all the time, even just thinking about just one quote. So, um, absolutely.
Nice. What about you,
I
Tori?
I definitely have um given jumped on the bandwagon of all men are going to be that devoted to you and they're going to love you and everything's in that love will conquer everything and you don't you live happily ever after and I mean it's very delusional but a lot of fairy tales were I mean it can there's parts of those
All
fairy
Disney.
tales in yeah Walt Disney every Disney movie ever like but like but like you get to a point in life where you realize not everybody is a Prince Charming and people lied to you growing up and this is one of those movies that I felt like I was lied to about like it could be all sunshine and rainbows but not for you like
Okay, so so this actually brings up, I think, something very interesting, and that is that although I don't know, Tori, did you ever actually read The Princess Bride? I don't remember if that
yeah.
was actually the name of the book,
Yeah, it
but
was
did
the name of the book.
did you read it?
Yeah, I read it whenever I was like 13.
Okay,
So I don't
okay.
really
Yeah, nobody
remember the book.
remembers that.
Yeah.
So Betty, did you read Anne?
I did. I haven't read every book in the series, but I did read in.
Okay,
It was very actually close. The first book was very similar to like the first
it
couple, I
was.
think. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did a very good job at doing that, and then taking elements, important elements of the book, and then placing them in the series. It was actually very well done. Like,
The thing that's interesting to me is my choice for my movie was also a book that I read, which I just found out is actually about to get its third installment or should be soon, and it's called Inkheart. And if you don't know what the story of Inkheart is, it's a fantastic world. I won't say too much about it, but it's a fantastic world where things in the book basically become a world all unto themselves. There's magic in the pages of the book. And this theme has been done a lot. I can remember there was a short animated, not well, not short animated, but there was an animated show called The Page Master, which had a kind of similar feel. This one reminds me a little bit of there was the series with Xena and Gabrielle where Gabrielle gets to write down stuff and then it comes true. It has a lot of those kinds of elements to it. The thing that makes this young adult special is that much like most young adult fiction, there is a mother that's out of the picture completely. She lives with her dad. Her name is Maggie. Um, and she is sort of thrown into a world that she clearly is not really ready to tackle, but she rises to the occasion with basically the tools that she has grown up with. Things become apparent to her that maybe weren't apparent to her before, and all of a sudden she's able to see things for what they really are instead of the fantasy and the fiction that they represent. Now, one of the reasons that I loved this book is on the first side of it, I desperately wanted to be a writer. That was my I just that was exactly what I thought I was going to be forever in a day. But the next piece of this is the movie itself creates this environment that is different from the book. And the book is new, so I didn't read this when I was a young adult. It resonates with me because I look back on how I was as a young adult and realize that I have so much in common with some of the characters here. Um, but the there is this sort of piece that goes along with this, and this is why I say that even if you are older, you can still absolutely find value in young adult literature. I realized that one of the things that happens in this book is this girl goes from thinking that she wants to be a part of every fantasy, sort of, all of her book pieces, to understanding that fiction does not give you any respite really from the problems of the quote unquote real world. Problems are just problems, whether they are fictional or whether they exist outside of the fictional realm. And this again, it sort of made me really think back to the way that I used to think too, which was my retreat and my escape was always through fiction. I mean, I would find myself, whenever I was having a difficult time with anything, finding a book, no matter what it was, and being just engrossed in it because that was my escapism. And I felt for this character so much because she reminded me so much of myself. Um, One of, I think, the most interesting things about all of the fiction that we chose is that, and this is happens to be one of these weird hallmarks in young adult fiction, the broken family has this kind of pervasive hold over all of our characters. And I wanted to know from you guys, Tori first and then Betty, how you think the method of telling young adult fiction with broken families, why do you think that that is the way that we choose to present to youth the important lessons that are involved in young adult fiction?
Uh, it's relatable. Most young adults can relate to a broken family, right? Like some no family is perfect, right? So
Mm.
you don't want to portray the perfect family because not very many people can relate to that. You want to have something askew, something off put, so they can definitely. Oh, I see a kitty. They can definitely like uh resonate with them. I think
Hmm.
that that's a good way of getting to kids, relating to them, getting on their level so they can understand things and learn things better. That's what teachers do, right?
True, very true. What do you think, Betty?
I think that representation is important, and um, I think a lot of us use these characters to navigate life and how we should actually experience things at the same time. No one really wants to see a movie with nothing happening. And if somebody has a completely happy life, what obstacles are they trying to solve? So
That's a that's a good point.
yeah, no one's watching a television show and watching the parts where the characters are just sitting there watching TV and eating Cheetos out of a bag. We're skipping to the good stuff,
That yeah, that would actually be kind of meta, wouldn't it? As
right?
you're sitting on the couch eating Cheetos, watching a family eat Cheetos. Yeah, I can see that.
Right.
I, I think I had this discussion a long time ago um, with someone about how we experience, especially as young adults, the world basically through made up trauma. And I'm not saying that young adults don't also face real trauma, because of course they do. But in fiction, we experience the world through fictional trauma in a way that allows us not to have to experience it ourselves. So if we have a mom and a dad, but we had to grow up with just our dad, or we had to grow up with just our mom, or we had to grow up with our grandmother, or if the world was so harsh outside and we were orphaned, what would that be like? And it allows for us to experience all of the difficult times of that trauma without actually having to experience it specifically. Um, and
To create
sometimes I think,
empathy or
yes,
felt it.
empathy. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I think that that's exactly it. There's also these pillars of and they've changed over the years because society has changed and our culture has put different emphasis on different pillars of character. So the pillars of character for Betty's movie, I'm sorry. Well, yes, actually that's true. They were very different than the characters that have the pillars of character strength for even the Princess Bride. They're very different because they're centered at different times. So while we can say that strength, courage, truth, all of those things are pretty universal, there are other things like social standing or um, things that relate specifically to the era in which they are written. They become universal over time, but they are written for a specific period and then they grow up sort of around us. And I think A Fault in Our Stars is a pretty good example of that. Have either of you two seen that movie or read that book?
Yes.
I've read and watched the movie.
Yep.
Read the book, watched
And
the movie.
would you agree that that is definitely a more contemporary take on what young adults are experiencing or what it the ways that they are experiencing the world now?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
do.
but
I think that was a beautifully written book,
It
honestly.
was. I really love that book a lot.
I love John Green. I
I
follow
do
him on
too.
TikTok, but I think that one was a little forced.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I liked the Amsterdam stuff, but I feel like they went out of their way to do. I think he went out of his way a little bit, and it's he considers that his best written book, and I like Paper Towns, so
Hmm.
or Looking
I
for
I
Alaska.
like Looking for Alaska. I like that
I
one a
love
lot
Looking for
more.
Alaska.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
Yeah.
a good one. Yeah, that is a good one. There was a film out a little while ago called If I Stay. Did you guys see that by any chance?
Mm-mm.
I believe so. Could you give me a little reminder?
Um, uh, let's see. If I Stay was, I'm trying to remember who the actress was in that. Um,
Was somebody in
what
a
was her
wheelchair in
name?
that one?
Uh, was she in a wheelchair? She wasn't in a
A
wheelchair.
guy. Like there's sorry, there was a lot of
Chloe
movies and books
Grace.
that were had similar names at that time.
It was Chloe Grace was the one that was in the movie. It was put out in 2015, and they they let's see what happens.
She keeps dying.
Basically, yeah,
My
he
eye is watering. I'm so sorry, guys.
Mia turns into the cello player, and um I want to say yeah, I want to say yes. She has an out of body experience because there's this horrific accident.
Oh yeah,
It's an interesting take on sort of like when your life flashes before your eyes.
yeah, I have seen that one. But she dies, right?
Yeah. Well,
Like a
spoilers.
lot. Like
Yeah.
keeps dying. Okay, yeah, I have
Yes.
seen that one.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
good
And
actually.
because it's that take on your life flashing before your eyes, but with multiple ideas of what would happen if, like the what if stories. Um, I really like that one. I like that. I like the concept of that one because I love the idea of uh, all of your choices have different kinds of consequences. And some of them are fantastic and some of them are not so fantastic, but they all equal what and who you are at any given point.
Did you see the
Um,
one where I think the guy kept so the guy was like reliving the same day over and over, and then there was a girl that turns out she could relive the same day.
Oh, yes. What was the name of that movie?
I can't remember, but that was very good too. It reminds
Yeah,
me of similar like themes.
yes. Yes. Very. You're right. Very similar, and also very romancy. There was a lot of. I felt like there was a lot of like
First love.
finding the right person. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So I feel like no good podcast on young adult themed movies would be complete if we didn't talk about Juno.
Oh yeah.
I love
I
Juno. I mean, obviously.
Me too. Me too. I, both because it feels incredibly difficult and because it is so incredibly hopeful as well. And sometimes that is one of those pieces where, especially, I'm sorry to say it, all of you young adult literature writers, I love you all, I really do, but sometimes your literature gets so mopey and into itself that it feels heavy
That's
to
what
the
I felt
point
about Fault
where,
in Your Stars.
whew,
That's
yes,
well, I felt that way about Twilight.
Ugh,
you
Twilight is
know,
so annoying.
you're
She
right.
whines a lot.
I think even Twilight felt very at times. The books
Very
for sure.
gloomy and mopey. Like, why did Edward see in her? She was so
Oh,
emo. Like that's
why? What? It was so. It was.
uh I don't know.
So the movies that were, and I happened to have teenagers, young adults actually at the time. They weren't even really that teenager when Twilight came out. Um I'm not that old. Um um Plus, yeah, I had kids when I was like 10. So yeah, I'm actually really young. No, I'm just joking. Um, the the Twilight books, which I am not actually sad to say that I read. I read them because I wanted to be involved with my kids, and it was the Twilight books were not as bad as the Twilight movies. The
No,
Twilight
they
movies,
weren't.
well, they
I read
really,
the first book
really,
because someone was like, "Read the book," and I went, "She's
they're
so
not
whiny."
written well. The thing is, they're
No.
not written well. But the content is actually. I like the content. I did like the content. I the writing style, uh, the for a book that should have been all about brevity, there was so little of it. It just it never feels like anybody is able to step up to the plate and do what's necessary to move on from wherever they are. And maybe that's the point because they're all like stuck. But for good young adult literature to succeed, the heroes and the heroines have to be able to break out. They have to be able to overcome the obstacles, whether it's through death or whether it's through a kind of metaphor where they are able to see the other side of the mountain. I mean, there's tons of examples of that. But Twilight resonates as one of those that just didn't. I feel like also, to be honest, the Hunger Games,
Yeah. That
while I
fell
loved
short too.
the books of the Hunger Games were amazing.
It
I
had
absolutely loved
the
them.
endings are so bad. Like
The
she
ending
cannot
was
write an ending to save
terrible.
her life. She's like
Yes.
everyone. She falls asleep and wakes up and everything happened.
Yeah,
Literally every
right.
book that happened.
Susan Collins doesn't, she hasn't, I don't think she's been able to embrace the idea of things can be happy because people made them happy. So instead, it's like they have to either be the status quo or they have to just continue on as if like there is no end in sight, which is just remarkably sad. And none of the movies that we talked about, well, except in Cart, which doesn't really have a good ending yet, they don't end that way. They end on what, even if they don't end on a happy note, they end on a note where there is hope to be found,
Hope.
which I think is super important in young adult literature. What do you guys think about that?
I
I
agree,
agree with
especially with
you.
Anne Shirley. Like her entire existence is about having hope, and one of my favorite things about it is the fact that it was written in the 1800s and it still transcends time. Like feminists are in it.
Mm,
You have strong women. You have a kind and caring man. talking about women getting the vote. So with one of the worst, Rachel Lynn. So, but no matter what happens, there's always like this kernel of hope. She can always go back to Green Gables, which is why it's sad when she doesn't have Green Gables because that's her safety place. And
Hmm.
I think it makes us feel safe because she has it. Um, and then you have her young love with her with Gilbert Blythe. So I think there's always like a kernel of hope, and there's always something to look forward to and to connect with because that's
I
her whole thing
definitely
is
feel like that's
optimism.
true.
Which is
Yes.
why I also don't like Anne with an E because I feel like Anne Shirley is supposed to be optimistic. Like even when bad things are happening, she always has like this glimmer of hope, and she always knows something good is going to happen, even when she's in the depths of despair, as she would say. The Anne with an E character is so gloomy, and you don't really have that optimism at every moment. Like,
I find it funny that that we've actually coined a word based on a fictional character to be the epitome of optimism. So when we say that something is Pollyanna, we're drawing from the idea that that is the absolute benchmark in here's what is the most optimistic. Um, but I feel like that's super true. And even in The Princess Bride, I feel like we all know from the very beginning, wow, it's not going to be as it's going to be perilous, it's going to be adventurous, it's going to be, I mean, but grandpa is reading to his grandson, so I think we're pretty sure that it's not going to end in death, carnage, and missing body parts.
It
But
could. It could.
I
He
guess
could
it
be
depends
like
on how the book
real
ends.
life lesson. Yeah.
I,
I
I,
wouldn't have
I
put it past my dad, you know. Like,
but I do think that that Wesley, from the moment that he leaves, keeps telling Buttercup, you have to have faith. You
hmm
have to have faith. Life is not about what you can just see. It's about what you feel and how you react to that as a part of your guiding principle. Um, I, I actually wanted to ask you, I have to ask this question. First of all, who is your favorite character in The Princess Bride? Because I'm not trying to see too much into that, but I just wanted to get your opinion because depending upon how old you are, I swear you have a different opinion. So tell me, what do you think?
I love Wesley. I thought he
Of
was
course.
hot. Like he was the best. He was the best. He was like the cat's meow. He was the bee's knees, in my opinion. But I also really liked the Spanish guy because I thought that he was strong and wanting to get
Mandy Patinkin, right?
retribution for
Yeah,
yes.
Mandy Patinkin.
I really wanted him not because he was cute, just because I wanted him to get vengeance for his father. Like
Do you think so? Okay, so and I mean, and we have moments of despair in The Princess Bride. That is for sure.
yeah.
There are 100 different pieces where, especially when Inigo, where you think he's down and out, and then he rises to the occasion, quite
Yes.
literally.
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
but I was struck uh watching that movie some time ago with my kids in how different they react to it now. So now when they watch The Princess Bride, one of everybody's favorite characters is Inigo. Um, but also one of their, I think, most favorite characters is, of all characters, Miracle Max,
Okay.
Is that
because
Billy
he,
Crystal?
yes, that was Billy Crystal, and uh uh
Because it was very funny. It was very
I haven't
memorable.
actually seen it.
it that scene is really funny. It's very
Yes,
funny.
it's
But
very funny.
the reason that they say that that is like one of the best and pivotal scenes in the movie is because when all hope is lost and the hero is dead, well, not all dead, just mostly
You're
dead.
just mostly dead,
It
yes.
my kids like
Spoiler. No, I'm just kidding.
rally to that. It's just so it it tells me a lot about, the phases that we go through in our lives and why young adult literature how it matters to us differently depending upon when we see it. Um I have to say I wonder um what would have happened in my psyche if I had read Inkheart as a book way back when I was young enough for that to be impactful. And I don't know. As an adult, I see sort of what went into it, but I don't know how I would feel about it if I was a kid. The books that I was reading when I was a kid were not young adult books. They were science fiction. I was reading Foundation before I even understood what Isaac Asimov was even trying to say. I was, yeah, I was a book snob, so there was that. But okay, so I'm going to ask another question that I think is a little bit important. Then we'll move on to our food. Uh, from a young adult standpoint, do you think that the stories that we are creating now and that are being adapted into either series or books, do you think that they are going far enough to teach young adults what they need to sort of have in terms of pillars of character, hope for the future, ideas that they can learn from? Give me your, what do you think? What do you think, Betty?
I think that is a good question. I guess it depends. I thought Harry Potter was doing that, and then look at who our Arthur is with her moral
Hmm,
fiber. Um, but at the same time, look at Anne Shirley. Marilla, when she's in the depths of despair, Marilla says, "To despair is to turn from God," and then you have an angsty middle schooler going, "Oh, what? I'm just going to be this way anyway." Um, I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't think so because I don't really think that that's what they care about. I think they just want pizzazz at this point.
hmm,
Like I don't think they're focusing on the actual lessons that are involved as opposed to are people going to like this and
Yeah.
stay focused.
all right, what do you think, Tori?
I think a lot of it has to do with the presentation, um, how kids view things that are cool and trendy, and what's hot out there, and who's the hot actress and who's the hot actor. Those all come into play with film. I think with books, though, kids resonate with it more because they can read into the character a little bit more. It's not who's acting, it's who is
That's
the
true.
character. So like they can relate to them better in their own way. Because I think
I,
reading is a more intimate act than watching a movie anyway.
it's true.
Because you're in your
I,
own head. You're not sharing it with anybody.
and it's
True.
also a case by case basis.
Also very true.
Yeah.
I'm going to lay down something and tell me if you agree. I think that what is happening right now is we, controversial hot take here, have a lot of very big companies who have, for lack of a better way to say it, gobbled up every production company out there that could have or would have taken a chance on perhaps something like The Princess Bride or
Disney.
Anne. Disney, yes. Well, I wasn't going to name names, but yes, indeed. We have studios that are basically feeder production areas for places like Amazon Prime and HBO Max. They have Netflix. They have intended audiences already. I believe that what is happening is that in the quest to create content that is more universal in appeal, we are losing our niche genres, which once played a really critical role in early development, young adult development, even early adult development. and we have sort of homogenized, for lack of a better term, the the content that goes in. So yes, maybe everything is rated PG-13, and maybe there are some R-rated pieces in it, or I mean there's R-rated parts to, whatever content you're looking at. But for the most part, that PG-13 is kind of golden because it gives you a little bit of MA, but it also appeals to perhaps a younger set, or doesn't disturb an older set enough so that they don't have the younger set participate with it. That's a problem. That's a huge problem because when we don't have these niche markets or these niche productions happening, we lose the value of the niche itself. So the genre sort of begins to shrink in on itself. And rather than taking the chance on something being beneficial and impactful, maybe 10, 15 years even down the road, we're still talking about movies that came out quite some time ago. We
But
end up with
I think
go
we
ahead.
always go through this. Do you think we always go through this phase? So in the 50s and 60s, you had the big studios that basically owned contracts for actors and actresses, but then
That's right.
they started losing those contracts and they ended up having to, like, in the 60s they started breaking the molds with like their horror films. So do you think they always go through a phase where it builds up to this one big thing? Right now it's Marvel superhero movies.
Hmm.
Um, so maybe we're just kind of waiting for somebody to break that mold and to restart something until it gets built into another um, market.
Well,
I don't know.
the reason that I brought up in the beginning in my intro, the reason that I brought up Enola Holmes and Sweet Tooth and Lock and Key was excellent. That's a really good
Yeah, it was
series.
excellent.
I loved
They were
it.
all of those were good, actually.
Yeah, they're just but that's specifically very young adult. And the reason that I brought that up is because I think that our niche market, or I should say our genre specific market, is actually moving. It's moving away from movies, because movies need to have such wide and diverse audiences in order to make them profitable. And so these genre pieces are moving to streaming content providers where they can sit for longer and gain more subscribers as kids start talking about them, as people start talking about them, as they become more and more popular.
And
And
limited
so you're
series.
right. I do think that this is an age old problem, and Hollywood is always trying to reinvent itself because content continually reinvents the industry as much as the industry reinvents the content. But I do think that it is worth it to sort of like look from the inside out at what is happening to especially books that are brought to the screen. Because sometimes in our quest to make things perhaps more palatable to a wider audience, we may lose some of the goodness that made it up in the first place. That's my
Ready Player.
that's my editorial take at the moment.
Yeah,
Um,
like Ready Player
so
One.
yes, Ready Player One, Ender's Game. I mean, just so
Oh,
many.
I love
Um,
Ender's Game, the book, but oh, the movie.
yeah, the movie was just
Bad.
terrible. Um, okay, so Betty, I am going to start with you and ask you, what did you bring to our movie potluck to celebrate your movie?
I brought plum pudding without dead mouse. Um,
Good thing.
right? Um, only people that know Anna Green Gables will understand that. Um, butter cake and raspberry cordial for the kiddos and currant wine for the other people.
Ooh, raspberry cordials, nice. Oh, we definitely need to do that for the blog. That'll be a big hit.
Yes,
Okay,
because
Tori, what did you bring us for the Princess Bride?
Okay, so I love the scene with the swamp rat and like he's fighting the swamp rat and the swamp rat catches on fire and then they gave me an idea for ratatouille.
Oh, wait a minute. Are you talking about the ROUSs?
What?
Are you talking about the ROUSs?
The ROUSs? What?
Tori, I'm not really sure that they exist.
Oh.
No, the ROUSs, the rodents of unusual size.
Oh,
Those are the
no.
swamp rats. And Wesley
Um,
says when she says when
I never
when
picked that up.
when 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 Buttercup says, "Wesley, what about the ROUSs?" Wesley looks at her dead in the eye and says, "I don't think they actually exist." Cut 1 second and one of them attacks him. So
Yes.
when I say ROUSs and then I say I don't really think that they exist, I'm just messing around with you.
Oh,
you have to throw
okay.
yourself from your chair like you're being attacked. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
God, you got it all wrong.
I'm so sorry. Okay, so Tori, continue.
So
Yes.
I picked Ratatouille because I figured, you know, it's incorporating the rodent and everything like that. And then for dessert, I want to go with peanut butter cups.
That's good.
Please, good
I
job.
love peanut butter cups.
Yes.
I'm not to one up you, I swear, but I am
Okay.
going to suggest that at some point you hop over to moviesandmeals.com and you look at our meatloaf rats because we made them actually for Willard because yeah, who doesn't love rats? But they would go perfect as ROUSs. They even
Yes.
have they have whiskers, they have carrot ears, they are super awesome. Yes, we had so much fun making meatloaf rats. So much so that one of my friends actually said, "I will never come to your house if you serve that." So, yeah, must have been a success. Okay, so I chose, and I'm only bringing dessert because I feel like that's all we need for this movie. And we actually did this for Halloween. We made spell books out of brownies,
Oh, that's
and
so
Oh.
cute.
they were super delicious. We melted chocolate and we gave the brownie little pages inside of our chocolates inside of our brownie squares. So when you pick up the brownie, if you're very careful, you can page through the book. So that was my Inkheart inspired uh
That's cute.
idea for our
Oh,
yes. I and I'm sure I would have put the symbol on the front too, just, to
that's
make it
cute.
fancy and fun. So that's what I brought. So okay, so a couple of quick things before we head out and before I let you sing us off with your social media uh, outs. Our next podcast is going to be a little bit different because it's all about the music. So next week is soundtracks that we can't forget. And what I am going to ask my guests to sort of come up with are not just movies that you loved the soundtrack for, but soundtrack pieces that you feel like are so iconic that the moment that you hear them, you immediately know the movie. Maybe
Oh,
we'll play a little name that tune.
I like that.
Um, and get creative with it because I guarantee there are probably more iconic sounds out there than we even realize that come from movies. So I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say about that. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Um tell me, Tori, how can we get you on social media?
Well, you can always find me at my podcast called The Infectious Geek, and also on my other podcast I have with my friend Destiny, Tori and Dez's podcast. My podcast is about all things geeky, and my podcast is about all things pot related. So
Nice.
please, yeah.
Mm.
So please join me for that. You can catch me on Facebook at Tori Rush, and you can catch me on Instagram at Rush Tori.
Very
Hot
good.
cat.
And
People
Betty,
are
how can
so,
we
people
find
are
you
so
on
good at
social
coming up
media?
with that stuff. Sorry. I am. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at Betty Chitty Bang Bang.
Very awesome. Very awesome. You have a great TikTok channel, by the way.
I
I
I was
hopped over
called.
and took a look at it.
Oh, thanks. I was called honest and hilarious by someone. So
Oh,
if you like honest and hilarious, apparently I'm the person for you.
So
nice.
your movie choice is making so much more sense now. I totally understand. Yes, very much. You can find me at moviesandmeals.com. Um, I still have a ton to post. We have been super busy making lots and lots and lots of recipes. Bear with us. We are trying to get as many of them up as possible. But I do have a new section for just the podcast and our food ideas. So I will post those soon. Also, just in case you want to buy some awesome movie potluck merch, we have a T Public account, which I am going to ask our producer to throw into our comments and post with the show. So hop over there, grab a t shirt or a hoodie, and wear your movie potluck merch with pride. Uh, Try not to eat too much or it'll move up to the next size, but maybe it's all for a good cause. I mean, this we do a good job of coming up with food for our movies. So we will see you next week. Again, Tori, thank you. Betty, thank you so much. I have had a
Thank you.
wonderful time this evening.
Me too. It was fun.
Bye. All right.